I spend so much of my life sitting in front of plastic that sometimes it really cheapens your life in more ways than just having plastic in front of you. You sit in your car, and especially in the older models, there used to be a lot of plastic in them. If you as I sit at my desk, I've got a plastic computer in front of me, plastic keyboard, and so forth. Some of the houses in my community have vinyl all around the side of them to keep them protected from storms. I was impressed by the man-made character of so much of life, and I was especially struck by this the other night when I was stepping outside with my dog. And at night I was standing out looking up and I saw the moon, clear, bright, almost a full moon, standing above with clouds passing alongside it and through it and so forth. And I was struck by the presence of God and the glory of His creation. And how much I miss seeing something of God's presence and the glory of His world when so much of my life is occupied by man-made things. I'm very thankful for man-made things. They make life much easier. But there's something unique, special about that which God Himself has created and made. The Apostle Paul has been challenged with regard to his apostleship. Is he really one who is sent by Jesus Christ? And does he speak with authority when he addresses us with a gospel supposedly from Jesus Christ Himself? Is Paul authentic, genuine? Is his message an original message? Or is Paul more of a self-made man, a manufactured man, an inauthentic man, plastic in his presentation? We see some people from time to time who strike you as being inauthentic. There's something not quite right there. They're plastic, they're manufactured, everything is contrived. You don't sense that there's a genuine person in front of you or someone who's being honest and straightforward with you. One would not have that impression with the Apostle Paul. In meeting with him, you get the sense that here is one who is very straightforward, very open, very honest about who he is and what he's about. He's not there to pull punches or to try to flatter people. He tells things like it is. And so the gospel message that he presents is a message that is not designed to flatter his audience or please his audience, although that was the accusation of the Judaizers of his day. His presentation of the gospel was under the direction of the Lord Jesus Christ, who was authorized as an apostle to present Christ's claims upon his generation. And so Paul presented himself as a very authentic apostle. Nothing fake or phony about him. But he has to defend himself before the Galatians who have so quickly departed from this original gospel that he has received from Jesus Christ. This gospel that is of such glory and truth that it tells us the way of salvation and fully provides for all that we need. The churches of Galatia were abandoning this true gospel and adopting a variety of false gospels, plastic gospels, synthetic, man-made. Paul is furious, flabbergasted, upset that they would so quickly abandon this true gospel. How can you do that? It just doesn't make sense. And so we saw last week that Paul asserted that the gospel that he proclaimed was an original gospel, it was the true gospel, and that there was no further need for adjustments, manipulations, or changes in the substance of that gospel to improve it or to make it more perfect. It was perfect as it came in its original form. It could not be improved upon. Now, as we make our way into the 11th verse, through the end of this first chapter, Paul seeks to make the point that the gospel that he received in its original form was a gospel that was not man-made or inauthentic, but came directly from God himself. And so in the 11th verse, he makes his basic proposition that the gospel that he received, that he preached, is not man-made, but comes from God. And this is what he's going to try to show from this point on into the second chapter. He's going to demonstrate that there is no good reason for thinking that his gospel was man-made. Rather, it came as a revelation from Jesus Christ. And so it was divine in its origins, not human. Why does Paul wish to make that assertion? Why is it so important for Paul to say this? Well, it certainly strengthens the authority of his message and the claim that he makes that the gospel is an original gospel and should not be perfected or added to. It is a gospel that he received not from men, where you could anticipate that there should be some improvements along the way. After all, people are fallible. We need to grow and make progress in our understanding of the world and of ourselves, and so therefore it might plausibly be suggested that the gospel which came from men needs to be tinkered with, improved, and adapted so that it's more effective in accomplishing its purposes. I mentioned some time ago I was listening to a public radio broadcast in which the reporter was interviewing a representative of the Mormon Church and questioning the representative about the beliefs of the Mormon Church and how they've come to them and where they are going in their future. And I was struck by one of the comments made by this individual who said that you have to be patient with us because we've just made up this religion only 100 years ago. Do you hear what you are saying? You made up this religion? And here's being honest and truthful. It is a man-made religion. Not based on a revelation from Jesus Christ. Paul asserts in the strongest of terms that his gospel had its origins in God himself. He's going to assert this with the fullness of his personality, with all that he can add to this argument. This comes from God. He even goes on later on in the text to swear to that effect. Before God, I say to you. This gospel comes from love. So, Paul wants to make it very clear to his audience and to us today that the gospel that he preached is from God. And after all, when you look at Paul and look at his writings, read through his account, you have to ask yourself, where does this come from? This magnificent theology, which challenges all the ways in which people think of themselves and think of the world. He turns the world upside down. Rather than trusting in yourself and your own good works, Paul throws it all out and says you must not depend upon yourself. You cannot perform any good works that are sufficient to save you. You must give yourself entirely over to the mercies of God. And he talks about justification, how it is a forensic act of God whereby He declares us right in His sight. How does God justify the wicked? How can that be? Does He just simply say it and it's so? No. Paul, in his preaching, reveals what God has done for us in Jesus Christ to take away our sin. And you look at the glory and the beauty and the amazing depths of Paul's theology. And you have to ask yourself, where does this come from? Now, Paul's going to make some claims here to defend the fact that his gospel comes from God. And you might question that assertion. Many today in the modern mind reject the supernatural and have the sense that, well, we cannot explain Paul on the basis of a divine revelation from God, because we know that can't take place in their minds. But we can explain him on more naturalistic terms. Paul is a product of his environment. And so modern theology has approached Paul in a variety of ways to try to explain what is the origin of this gospel that he preached. Was it de novo? Was it out of the blue? Or did it have its roots in his background? So some will suggest, well, it has its roots in this Jewish faith, his understanding of the Messiah, the Daniel vision, the Son of Man coming in the clouds of glory. And Paul takes this and imposes this theology upon Jesus of Nazareth and works with it from there. Others suggest, no, Paul didn't get his theology from his Jewish origins. Rather, it was from pagan origins, from the mystery religions that were current in his day, as it was thought. And Paul, being raised in Tarsus, a Gentile city, was subject to these influences, and he adapted this lordship mentality of the mystery religions and brought it into close proximity to Jesus of Nazareth and went off with that. And so there have been a variety of attempts to explain Paul on naturalistic terms. If you take a moment to read J. Gresham Machen's book, The Origin of Paul's Religion, you will see that he examines these different points of view and exposes how they've fallen apart, almost in the very assertion of them. They do not properly take into account what Paul has to say about himself or the nature of the text, either in Paul's writings or in the book of Acts. They fall apart in their descriptions of what Paul has to say. Let's look at what he says. First of all, his Jewish roots. He talks about his upbringing and how he was raised in the Jewish traditions of his time. He asserts that his connections to his Jewish faith were so strong that he ran far ahead of others in his own generation, of his own time. He was far advanced from the other students in his classes as they sat under Gamaliel. As he made his progress along, he was a noted pupil within their classes. He advanced far above them all. And then such was his zeal that he attempted to persecute the Church of Jesus Christ because he saw it as a blasphemous religion.